Oh, you think class is more important than race? Oh, you think race is more important than class? And then all you're doing is fighting when you cannot win on economic issues unless you unite against it.
That's what the right is doing. Honestly, there's like small weird subsets of the left, absolutely, or the left, whatever you want to call it, blah, 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 who might hyper focus on how like there's no war but class war, we all need to unite, blah, blah, blah. But I would say in terms of the advocacy, for the most part, from leftists, it's usually policy driven, usually policy based. And when it comes to pushing back against the right, it's usually pushing back against the culture wars that they're constantly raging against. All right, so we've had some pretty intense content on the show recently, and we're probably gonna have to cover a little bit more intense content, unfortunately, because people keep trying to defend Russell Brand for one reason or another. But I could use some lighter and funner stuff. I figured, how about a let them fight variety? You know, two people who are gonna have some spicy takes. Yeah.
Founder of the Young Turks, Cenk is out with a new book entitled Justice is Coming, How Progressives Are Going to Take Over the Country, and America is going to love it. I don't know if I'm going to love it, but apparently America will.
The book argues two main ideas. One, that progressives
oh my God. You will love this.
Are correct on substantively these kind of policy issues, and two, America is actually a very progressive country. Millions of us know that we are part of something larger and that a movement is already transforming Washington. Cenk is here with us now to discuss. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here.
So this was part of the Bernie 2020 pitch, obviously, that there's a genuine populist movement that just needs to be tapped into in the United States. And there were many aspects of that campaign that seemed to validate that reality, the fact that he out-fundraised rather everybody else in the race, despite not taking any corporate PAC money or billionaire dollars. But at the end of the day, seemed unable to squeak one out, both in 2016 and 2020. So what do you say to folks who push back against the idea that progressivism is actually popular, given that we have not had very much success in the electoral realm?
Yeah. So a decent amount of the book is actually dedicated to that. First, chapter 1 explains that it's indisputable that the country is progressive on almost every issue. I say almost just because maybe I couldn't find one, but every issue I looked at, the country is about 2/3 progressive. And so that might be shocking to people who are used to mainstream media, because why don't we win? Because of mainstream media. Mainstream media creates a mythology that this is a center-right country, a conservative country. It creates a mythology that corruption is perfectly normal, that taking corporate bribes is normal. It's not normal. It's what most corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans do. It has greatly corrupted our system, and most importantly, it has corrupted our media. The reason why I say it's most important is because that is where the voters get their information. If they get the wrong information, there's no way in the world they can make the right decision. And corporate media, mainstream media, has been lying to them for decade after decade after decade. Once we get past that monster, then progressives will easily win, because the entire country, at least on economic issues, for sure, is progressive.
Yeah, I think, look, I think I have to admit, as someone who doesn't agree with a lot of what progressives have to offer in economics, although I'm sure we can find areas of agreement. Sure, the economic agenda being offered by the left is, I read polls too, regardless of what I think about it, is certainly more popular than, what I would describe as the kind of elite social and cultural values that are not necessarily attached to policies, but are very hugely alienating to so many normal Americans. That
Ask him to do his Lance impression.
the issues beloved by the elites. So how do
progressives
get through then, or stop allowing college professors to speak on their behalf, or the woke employees at institutions that want to cancel everyone, that sort of thing that gets associated with progressivism and gives the whole project a bad name?
Can I be real? I don't actually disagree with most of what Cenk is saying yet. And honestly, this is what y'all do. This is what the right does. And a lot of the corporate media, you think that all the left cares. Like, the left is consistently playing defense when it comes to the culture wars in relation to things like CRT in schools and the trans agenda and all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, no, if you were to look at where, say, the science lands on trans people and where the medical community is at that point, y'all are so woefully behind that you see a lot of things that are basically just the broad consensus consensus of the scientific community as being some ideologically driven crusade to turn more people trans and queer, which is just so strange how you flip that. But anyone who's up against you when you're saying that is obviously positioned in such a way where I now have to be like, okay, well, your culture war is another person's civil rights, not mine personally. I happen to be cis, but at the same time, that doesn't by default mean that I want to oppress other people. So I think they should have just equal opportunity to have the same access to healthcare as everybody else. And because of that, y'all are trying to stand in the way. So that's where you're situating yourselves as the enemy, right? But it feels as if now I am some kind of massive culture warrior, SJW, fighting for the rights of all trans people. It's like you've positioned us there. Where at the same time, what I think Cenk and the idea of the book is that, like, if you poll people, if you look at like, hey, by the way, what do you care about? What is really top concern of your day? What do you think about this? What do you think about that concept? What do you think about this? Time and time again, a lot of what Americans will agree upon, if it's phrased, that's really key, by the way. If it's phrased correctly, they will agree on concepts like, yeah, we should have a public option for healthcare. Yes, we should pay for higher education. Yes, we should do something to solve the housing crisis that can come from people who have lots of wealth and accrued wealth from, say, housing and development and stuff like that. They start to agree with a lot of the things that are seen as far left neo-Marxist kind of shit when they're phrased the way the right wing phrases them, right? If you tell them about how they want to put communist death camps in the fucking government programs, and then you're like, he was talking about fucking healthcare. No, it's not a communist death camp. But okay, but when you phrase it like that, it sounds really bad, sure, right? And so then all of a sudden there's this thing called the culture war. We're all fighting the culture war, right? And that's what the left is really, all these lefties are all focused on the culture war, identitarian politics and stuff like that. That aspect of activism, that's defensive. That's playing defense against the right wing who are obsessed, because that's all they offer. The right, it's bereft of fucking anything else now. There is no policy. There is no, outside of what, put more border security, more money into the border, more money into the military. This is about all we can really say. But outside of that, it's like, yeah, that's about all the social program. We want to have small, limited government, you see, very limited, and we definitely don't want to impact business and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple of issues there, Robbie. Number one, corporate media, both, and when I say corporate media, that has the umbrella of what we consider mainstream media, like CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, NPR, etc., and right-wing media. They're both under corporate media. And so NPR might seem like an odd fit there, but it has the same exact groupthink as the rest of them do. And corporate media loves it when we engage in the culture wars. Go extreme left, go extreme right, tear each other to pieces, and don't look up, because the real people in power are above you. It's not the immigrant that came in without $1 in his pocket just across the border. He has no power at all. It isn't the LGBTQ person competing in sports in high school. That's not the issue in America, but it works brilliantly in tearing us apart. But the second part of it is a little bit true, Robbie, which is that some portions of the left have totally fallen into that trap, in my opinion, and are engaging in not only those culture wars, but only those culture wars. Brother, I need you to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So we can fight back against the right wing on those social issues, and at the Young Turks, we aggressively do that. But at the same
That's the part where y'all were told such a small, minimal thing from both the majority of your peers, other civil rights activists, other people involved in this kind of like discussion for, again, having equal opportunity rights for everybody. You were told something that was not a very big ask. It was like, hey, by the way, inclusive language is a good thing. Y'all know that because y'all used to talk about it the same year, you know, like we're talking months ago, you talking about this exact issue, and you're like, yeah, inclusive language doesn't take anything away from anybody. It's certainly not erasing women, you know, that not a big ask. And then you were like, whoa, goddamn lefties, they've lost their minds. They're obsessed with this like trans agenda. They're so obsessed. And you're like, no, this is right wing shit, you know. That's the part that sucks.
time, I need you to focus on what unites us economically. Otherwise, we'll never be able to beat the people up top.
I wanted to dig into that a little bit more. Recently, I'm sure you're aware, there was some controversy among the left because podcast host and comedian Jimmy Dore recently made a sort of argument like this to Cornel West, arguing that he was overemphasizing resistance to white supremacy, at least in his rhetoric, if not in his campaign, and he was pushing him to focus more exclusively on economic issues. How do you see that trade-off, and do you think that there needs to be a kind of hierarchy of things like economics over racial or social issues, or in the case of the argument that Jimmy Dore was making, a focus on COVID and being anti-mandate and anti-moratorium over something like the fight against white supremacy?
Yeah. So this gets super nuanced. So let me walk through all of it as quickly as I can. First, the number one problem with Jimmy Dore's approach is he goes and mainly agrees with the right wing on social issues, and then says, "Oh, like I'm not going to agree that the vaccine doesn't work. Sorry, I'm not going to agree to things that aren't true. I'm not going to agree that the election was stolen." I'm not saying that Jimmy's saying that. I've lost track of what the crazy ramblings in his head or what he says out loud. But he keeps trying to bring the left over to the right wing. That's not how you do it. You say, look, it's not that you guys are moving your position or that we're moving our position. It's just that we're finding common ground in the places where we agree. Both of us can take yes for an answer. But you should not sheep herd your audience to the right wing. That is not at all productive. Now, in terms of hierarchies, like I said earlier, you don't need a hierarchy. Why do we have to debate and vote on, is this social issue more important or is this economic issue more important? It's not that hard to do both. It's not. So when they pass laws against...
But like, who's saying not to do that?
Trans people, gay people, etc., in these states, when they pass a law saying we shouldn't teach real African American history in Florida, you could fight back against that. And at the same time, hey, Republicans, you know that 3/4 of you agree with us on paid family leave. We'll take yes for an answer. Come on, let's go do paid family leave together. Let's make sure that moms and dads have 12 weeks off after they deliver a baby. And so there's no reason in the world you can't do both. And once you get into hierarchies and prioritizing, that starts internal wars. Oh, you think class is more important than race? Oh, you think race is more important than class? And then all you're doing is fighting when you cannot win on economic issues unless you unite against the...
That's what the right is doing. Honestly, there's like small weird subsets of the left, absolutely, or the left, whatever you want to call it, blah, 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 who might hyper focus on how like there's no war but class war, we all need to unite, and blah, blah, blah. But I would say in terms of the advocacy, for the most part, from leftists, it's usually policy driven, usually policy based. And when it comes to pushing back against the right, it's usually pushing back against the culture wars that they're constantly raging against. Like there is no policy on the left to liberate Bud Light beer from hate speech coming against, like, no one on the left cares. It's a massive corporation, you know, it's like, let them fight. Same thing for like the left is not fighting on the behalf of Disney to allow them to release as many woke films as they can. Like, we're pushing back against the culture wars of the right in that respect whenever we talk about that. But I would hope, you know, an AOC or a progressive or however you want to have, Bernie Sanders would be putting forth a lot more things related to unionization, striker and worker rights, that kind of stuff. Paid family leave, absolutely. Those are the things where you want the politicians to be at the forefront, you know? And then on the other side, when the media pundits are talking about CRT is taught in all schools, you're like, well, it's not though. It's not. Just one, like, I'm again, as a online internet personality, I can tell you that's not true.
Establishment. They're the ones that are actually in charge.
Speaking of sheep herding, there are some who are over the idea of working within the Democratic Party who see the obstacles to actually winning as insurmountable after Bernie Sanders, who was better positioned than probably any candidate the left is going to have in generations, was thwarted the way he was thwarted by the Democratic Party. And now people are seeing the way the DNC is ostensibly rigging the election in various ways, not having any debates, saying that there will be no primary, changing the order of the primary contest, et cetera, in a way that makes it very difficult for insurgent candidates like Mary Lamson and RFK Jr. to advance in the polls. As a consequence of all of that, many people on the left are saying, I'm over participating in the Democratic Party entirely, are looking to third-party campaigns like Dr. Cornel West's campaign, and see those who would want folks to participate in any kind of electoral contest within the Democratic Party as doing exactly that, as sheep herding, especially when some of the people who might encourage one to vote for a Democrat ultimately in 2020 or 2016 and probably in 2024 are going to say at the end of the day,
I don't like either of these people. Yeah, I know. Neither do I. I knew this is exactly how it would go. It's kind of just a let them fight moment, because obviously there are some things in which I can agree with Cenk in terms of, like, you know, media manipulation, how a lot of people will hyper focus on cultural war issues, but that is 100% because of the right wing media apparatus, by the way. That's their entire thing. They want to push false consciousness. They want you to be distracted by this shit 24/7. But yeah, a lot of policy ideas would be enormously popular if they were phrased in a different way. But then, you know, we're now in the middle of talking about, like, well, you know, what about the fact that the Democrats have effectively tried to, you know, prevent the rise of an RFK Jr. And I'm like, but fuck RFK Jr. You can say that, yeah, there's certainly a lot of problems with the corporate manipulation of party politics that are done by the Democrats to continue to secure neoliberalism. That's another topic. We don't need to defend RFK Jr., the anti-Semite homophobic weirdo, you know?
Trump and vote for the Democrat, even if they don't reflect the progressive values that you've said, and I agree, are so popular. What do you make of that argument?
So I think that rationality dictates that you have to understand the distinction between primaries and general elections. So the establishment says you shouldn't have primaries, especially on the Democratic side. You should just bow your head. Whoever's in charge, they get to dictate who should be.
Yeah, pretending that both the left right are pushing culture war is insane. One side is clearly pushing it while the other just does defense, and that's it. And then if you position yourself in such a way that you say one of two things as a leftist, right? If you're like, oh, well, I just want to say that there are parts of the left that have just become obsessed with the culture wars, and also there are parts of the left that are just going too far, and they're asking you to do a lot of things that are just kind of ridiculous, and normies find it ridiculous, right? Like, come on, do we have to use the term birthing person? Can we all just accept that that's just kind of like wild, or like, you know, the bonus hole is very offensive to me, so I don't want us to say that and stuff like that. And like, but no one's advocating for that. So that's what the right is saying is a problem, but it's not a problem. That's a fake problem to distract you with, and now you're validating that fake problem. That part sucks, because now they are going to go forward and they're going to be like, yeah, progressives call out absurdity of their own, you know, flock.
Be the leader, and you progressives are rascals. You're so unruly. You must obey, right? If you listen to that, you're nuts. That is them totally brainwashing you. There should be a massive primary against Joe Biden. Poll out today, 72% of Americans think that he is not mentally capable of running again, that he's too old. 72%. And the lunatics in the Democratic Party and the lunatics in Washington go, yeah, we should run a guy that 72% of the country doesn't think could be president against Donald Trump. They say this is the most important election of our lifetimes, but let's run an addled, wounded antelope against this demagogue fascist. How does that make sense? That doesn't make any sense at all. They're just, their lust and their greed for power is unbearable. So that's the primaries. And in the primaries, Marianne is at this point clearly the best candidate. It's not even close, okay? But as you see there's one thing I wanted to quickly correct, because in my opinion, I don't think the Democratic Party has much power at all. So they set the debates, they set this, they set that. I understand that, but they don't rig votes. They just set all the context. And I hate the rules that they set, and I think they're deeply corrupt. But that's not the number one problem. The number one problem is media. If Marianne Williamson got the same amount of respect and coverage in the media as Joe Biden did, Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy gets, then Marianne would be in a real contest with Joe Biden. But the media freezes her out, shames anyone who supports, oh, she's not serious. Like, you morons are serious? You've ruined this country. But yes, when you get to a general election and somebody's sitting at 3% and the other two guys are sitting at 40%, well, brothers and sisters, I love you, but there is a reality that you are, in fact, taking a vote that would be against Donald Trump, and you're putting it in a category that is not going to win, and you all know that. I'm not saying today. I'm saying if you get to election day, and the polling still shows that, and don't give me this crap about, I don't believe in polling, I think 3% could magically turn into 51%. But if on that day, your candidate's definitely not going to win, why would you help Trump? Why? Why would you help him?
Well,
it just makes no rational sense to me.
Let me ask you this, Cenk. Why would the Democratic Party ever stop, you don't want to characterize it as rigging, I will, rigging the primary, disallowing a primary? Why would the media ever stop putting its finger on the scale the way that it does? If voters ultimately validate that behavior by continuing to vote blue no matter who, no matter how bad the Democratic Party gets, and no matter how corrupt the DNC is, when does it stop?
Yeah, it's
because you're not voting to reinforce that behavior as an act of like, I endorse this specific thing, right? In that case.
stops when we win the goddamn primary. And by the way, that's impossible. No, it's not. Bernie came this close in 2016, and he came this close in 2020. He won the first 3 states. And who stopped him? Was it the Democratic Party that stopped him? No, it was corporate media that then heaped tons of negative coverage on Bernie. Can we get past corporate media? Of course we can.
I know
it's super hard, and that's their wall that's meant to keep us out, right? But look at us. You're doing it on Rising, we're doing it on Young Turks, and all of us are getting past it by having these conversations and having it reach the American people. Can a progressive win a primary? Absolutely. But we need to have progressives who try and who bring us together on economic issues like Bernie did in 2016. And then I guarantee you victory. That's also what the book is about. I guarantee you victory in 2028.
Cenk, you don't think that the Democratic Party played a role in Obama calling the leading candidates, including Pete Buttigieg, who at that point had done better than Joe Biden, and asked him to drop out after the South Carolina win? You don't think that that's evidence that the Democratic Party is willing to do whatever it takes to consolidate around a non-progressive candidate?
Brianna, I don't disagree with you 1%. That's not what I'm saying. I know Obama did that. I know that the so-called moderate Democrats, who are actually corporate Democrats, coalesced. By the way, Elizabeth Warren has done many great things in her career. You cannot wipe that away. But her not coalescing with Bernie, both in 2016 and critically in 2020, cannot be forgiven. It was just, when they coalesce, we have to coalesce. Anyways, but Brianna, what I'm saying is that was not the critical factor. Obama can get all of the corrupt Democrats together and all.
I feel like a lot of these are slogans. I was like, so they had the power to do that because they are the Democratic establishment. You know that because you point out how bad it is that there is a Democratic establishment that can do that and coalesce their power and concentrate it. Like the unity that you require in the opposite direction, you would have, like, this is not Cenk, by the way. I don't know what his idea on the force to vote was, but like for Brianna Joy Gray, who's really pro force to vote, like that's one of the things that could damage that dramatically.
Corporatists together and they can go, whoa. But if the media doesn't then smear Bernie and doesn't elevate Biden, it doesn't work. It's the media that's the critical part. The Democrats try to rig elections, but if the media didn't play along, that plot would not have worked at all. Bernie would have won the 4th primary state and it would have been over. We were so close. My problem with progressives in Congress is we got near the goal line and now they're going backwards. And they're going, oh, corporate Democrats, we bow our heads, we all endorse Joe Biden. Are you nuts? What are you endorsing Joe Biden for? He's a terrible candidate. He's a weak candidate. He's going to lose. He's not very progressive. And you endorse him without getting.
It's a re-election year. This is kind of the thing that happens. I actually, to be honest with you, did not think that there was going to be a dramatic, like, groundswell, like, alternative candidate that was going to suddenly get a lot of people excited to the point where they'd actually directly challenge, you know, progressive institutions. I just don't see that happening in this situation. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, I would adore if you know, Joe Biden wasn't the candidate. Definitely was not a happy person that Joe Biden ended up becoming the candidate.
Anything in return? Don't you know, even elementary politics? Use your leverage, for Christ's sake. Guys, you've got to trust me on the numbers. We're going to win these primaries. And mainstream media gets weaker by the day, and we get stronger by the day. Those primaries are ours. It's just like, even today, why don't we have a more forceful primary against Biden? Because while the media whines and complains about Biden, the minute that anybody steps in the race, they go, how dare you put your head to the leader? If you're a Democrat and you're a progressive, are you nuts listening to corporate media? No, do not ever listen to corporate media. Their job is to lull you back into sleep and make sure that you love the status quo and that you obey corporate rule. Do not do that. Go and fight in the primaries. It is not at all too late. Look, if these
again, but these are slogans, right? Like, honestly, if you want to, like, genuinely go to battle right now for someone or something where you could have potential victory and power, you got to start doing that in local elections. They're nowhere near as sexy as presidential elections or even primaries for presidential elections, but they have very low voter turnout, and they determine an overwhelming amount of policies and things, budgetary things, that are going to concern your everyday lives, including police budgets and how police treat people. That's not as sexy, I know. No, I don't get why I don't hear more mainstream political media personalities talk about that, though, because that is legitimately, like, you're not going to get a third party primary victory against Joe Biden in his second election cycle. That's the math doesn't add up on that one, right? And again, I wonder why, because, like, yeah, it's like you don't get views for small local elections. That's for sure. They're nowhere near the coverage or numbers you get for the presidential election. That's also true. But it's one of those things where, like, it's a lot more effective if you legitimately want to start impacting change, especially within your local community.
The only choices we have, voting for Marianne Williamson in the primary is the biggest no-brainer a progressive should ever have. There's no reason in the world to vote for Biden. She's both a stronger candidate and a more correct candidate.
Jake, let me ask you this before we go, and I'm sure you get into some of this in your book. You know, I think you're so correct to rail against the mainstream media, the corporate media, and the choices that they make. And, you know, obviously we're part of a corporation, so I guess I can't say we're not corporate media, but we try to platform and celebrate alternative narratives like your own. Yeah. Let me ask you this, because you went after Jimmy Dore a minute ago. I've noticed that in a lot of these independent and alternative media,
that's one area where the right wing does well. They vote in small races, just like a state legislative school board. Same thing here. Like, right now, I live in Vancouver. I became super heavily involved in the last local election here for our mayor, but it ended up going far right. Well, not far right, I'd say right wing, but very pro-cop, by the way. ABC is a very pro-cop. Fucking Ken Sim is a very pro-cop fucking candidate and policy-wise, because fear-mongering worked at the local level, scaring lots of people that there's more crime, there's more drug addiction. We had a massive homeless tent city that was on the downtown east side, was contributing. This documentary came out about how harm reduction actually brings more addicts to the streets. It all worked. It worked, and people got freaked out, and the whole election swung to the cops. And that sucks. But I really witnessed firsthand the amount of power and effort that the right-wing apparatus was doing on a local level. They were organized. The corporate world was organized. Lululemon, the really popular brand that you have all around the world, the owner of that brand was one of the reasons why it all happened. He made that documentary. He sponsored it. He sponsored events and screenings to show people and put all this money into it. And that fucking corporate money translated into a local election victory that no one else was paying attention to, right? Like I was basically the only person of any significant size, and I'm a baby in the scheme of things, saying like, hey, by the way, this local election is happening in Vancouver. The cops are trying to take over the city, blah, blah, blah. And then boom, they had all the fucking money in the world to make that shit pass.
Spaces of voices we've featured on the show before, people who got big by having very pro-Bernie Sanders audiences and messages, have had, if not a right-wing drift, a drift, I'm not sure that's in the direction of progressivism, or it's not in the direction of normal Bidenism either. It's in a direction, I think, of being more open to the right, people like, or people whose audiences, I think, have that perspective, like Glenn Greenwald's audience, Russell Brand's audience. We're going to be talking about Russell Brand later today for anyone, watching this right now. That kind of thing. How does that square with your thesis on the inevitable takeover of progressivism?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. Number one, people are getting so frustrated with the Democratic Party because they almost never deliver that they're looking for alternatives. I mean, look, as a meta issue, that's why Trump won in 2016 in the first place. The country is so deeply anti-establishment, except no one on TV will ever tell you that because they are the establishment. They're not going to come on TV and go, hey, by the way, country, I'm going to end the gaslighting here. It turns out you guys all hate us. They're not going to say that, okay? So that is the absolute reality here. So, but when you get into the Jimmys of the world, there's audience capture and there's financial interest. And then some have just lost their minds, in my opinion. Okay. And so, for example, Jimmy does a video that's pro-vaccine. It doesn't get a lot of views. He does one that's vaccine skeptical. It gets a lot of views. Guess what he does next? 20 more videos that are vaccine skeptical. That's called audience capture. And you partly do it for the ego.
We now know it's also for the
money,
billionaire.
and it takes strength not to go in that direction.
Billionaire funded.
And the right wing is going and capturing these hosts one by one. And everybody has their different things. Look, I don't know Russell Brand and Glenn Greenwald's situation, but I do know that sometimes if some people have done terrible things, where are you going to go? You're not going to go to the left where they're going to out you and they're not.
People like Cornel West because he is going ham on Cop City. Yes, and that's what I want to see from someone who is like realistically, like, the campaign itself knows that, like, he's not going to in the general election produce more than say 5% of the vote kind of thing, but use that platform then to bring attention to issues that Joe Biden is not going to talk about, right? Joe Biden's not going to say stop Cop City or anything even close to that.
Not going to support you. You're going to go to the right where they circle the wagons and they say you can do anything you want as long as you agree with us.
Cenk, I have to offer some, I think, pushback there. One, on two fronts. One, I do think that you're accurately describing a psychological phenomenon where if people are getting a lot of criticism and pushback, some of which they perceive to be bad faith, there is an inclination to spend more time with people who have been nicer. I'm not saying that's a moral choice, but it is an obvious psychological outcome. And does that mean that people within the left community should perhaps extend more grace to each other so that that doesn't actually happen? And the second, I would just want to ask you about, similar accusations I feel I would be remiss not to bring up that have been made about your network, Young Turks, about the $20 million of Katzenberg money that some people have argued changed the direction of TYT's coverage in a more liberal and less left direction.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll take it one at a time. Should people show each other more grace on the left? Absolutely. At the same time, you notice a phenomenon. It's okay to point it out. So it's okay for us to point out what Jimmy does with his videos. It's super obvious. It's one thing to criticize the Democratic Party. As you can tell from this interview, I do it very regularly and very forcefully. It's another thing to say the Republicans are okay. The Republicans are not okay. The Republicans are a disaster. The Republicans are much worse than the Democrats. Okay, now on to the second issue. Yeah, so then people go and look around and they go, okay, well, the Young Turks got 20 million investment. Okay, now here's the things people don't know. People say Katzenberg was involved, no question. The amount he has is near microscopic. And by the way, we paid the money back. So I be honest, that's breaking news. We've never told anyone that, but we did. So that has no influence on.
Wait, you paid $20 million back? What? Why? that's what I got. Yo, if I got a payday like that, 20 mil, cool. And I don't have to change my reporting in any way. You're just gonna give me all that money? Actually, I can still say whatever the fuck I want. Hell yeah. Banner. Why would you give that back? Like, fair enough if it actually impacted your ability to talk about anything, like you couldn't actually go after Katzenberg or anything like that, then okay, fine, that's selling out. Like, I'm against that. I am against that. I'm not against just taking a fucking billionaire's cash and there's no stipulations though. Hell yeah, I'll take your money. Fucking better me than some fucking, you know, oil baron somewhere. I'll spend it on good shit.
People just make up that we went towards the right
and fun shit too.
Or went towards the
I will get
moderate
fucked
Democrats.
up.
I mean, they call me like those that the lunatic fringe that follow Jimmy say we're establishment shills. They haven't watched 1 minute of the show. I mean, look at what the things I said to you before this question, right? Does it look like a 1% pro-establishment? But they will see that and go, aha, nail it, he's for Hillary Clinton. Well, look, I can't help you if you're not dealing with facts and logic. You can't show anything where we're in favor of Hillary Clinton.
Well,
no one
let me
fights
help you,
harder in the
Jen.
primaries against corporate Democrats than TYT does, Young Turks does, and I do. I formed the Justice Democrats to fight against corporate Democrats, and we defeated them. There's nothing more practical and more real than what I did there in that instant.
Well, you didn't defeat them. Like, honestly, I can't take anything away from doing that. That's awesome. That's actually someone who is like a, you know, a media entertainer trying to actually enact, you know, political change in the world. That one, I'm just like, oof, yeah, that's definitely a fucking cool thing that you did. But you didn't defeat the corporate Democrats.
I mean, I think specifically one of the moments that I remember of TYT being characterized as no longer capturing the spirit of the Justice Democrats, or what the Justice Democrats were supposed to do, was the moment around Force the Vote, where there was a push for the elected squad members to take an adversarial relationship to the Democratic Party and Nancy Pelosi specifically, to withhold their votes for them the same way that we've now seen the Freedom Caucus model with withholding their votes for Kevin McCarthy at the beginning of this year, really testing the theory of how that would work and getting in return a number of concessions that I think we can all acknowledge would be amazing for the left to have achieved. And at that time, despite there being a
ceremonial
poll
vote
that TYT put out of its audience, where a majority of the TYT audience seemed to support Force the Vote, the newscasters, the personalities on the show, were very much against it. And as I'm sure you can remember, that caused a significant rift down the left that persists.
A rift that the people on the other end of, myself included, don't give a fuck about. If Force the Voters shut the fuck up about Force the Vote, I would never invoke it. I would never be like, so y'all really fucked up, eh? That was pretty fucking hilarious and embarrassing. You can see how bad it could have been right now with Kevin McCarthy and Matt Gaetz, right? The whole like not getting anything in either direction. The whole like everyone else laughing from the sidelines, being like, "Oh, this is ridiculous." Yeah, that the ceremonial aspect of it, in which like you're trying to exude and use soft power in a way in which it doesn't actually get you your goals. That's embarrassing. So. But I would not invoke it. I never would. I wouldn't use it in a derogatory way. I wouldn't be like, by the way, that was really sad that you still like stuck to that years after it had been pretty fully debunked that it would have been just a useless gesture. Again, a ceremonial vote, getting people on the record doth not bring you the Medicare for all. Everyone here is fighting for Medicare for all. Just some people won't stop talking about one aspect of
in many
this.
ways. What do you say to that? I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, it's crazy. But thank you for bringing it up, because I'm happy to address it and try to clarify the best I can. Guys, do I look like I don't want to force votes? Of course I do, right? And I tell every congressperson that's going into Congress for the first time, if they'll listen to me, I tell them, you have to create what...
Wait, there are allegations against Glenn Greenwald? Glenn Greenwald's allegations are pretty old, but there's enough websites that still have the old websites that he took down. Basically, they're along the lines of that he was a sex tourist in Brazil who started running a sex tourism industry specifically catered to U.S. American clients to have sex with younger men. Not underage, by the way. None of it was about underage, but it was about sex tourism and exploiting sex workers in another country for the benefit of wealthy American imperialists, however you want to lay. And that is mostly, you know, I mean, unless the websites were fake or unless someone knew years later, you know, that he would have been famous, then they would have created and planted these websites that look like GeoCity websites from like 20 years ago, but they're still on. I've seen the Wayback Machine links. They're still active, and they still were, yeah, an active sex tourism industry that was being, you know, promoted at the very least, if not co-run by Glenn Greenwald.
The civil rights movement called Good Trouble. Now, that doesn't mean you go in wildly and flailing around doing impractical things, but it means you come up with a coordinated strategy You then create good trouble, and then you.
Yeah, I'm not huge on that link either, though, because like a lot of the stuff on Glenn is obviously catered or designed initially by a lot of the people who were going after him from a kind of like really homophobic point of view, because there's nothing wrong with A, being gay, B, wanting to have sex with men, or even C, wanting to have sex with lots of men, and there's nothing wrong with that aspect of it. What would be wrong that he was doing was explicitly exploiting people in other countries as a US sex tourist and running a like a brothel or a brothel ring or whatever his direct involvement was. That's where the problem comes in. But a lot of the stuff was usually framed around like, you know, this disgusting pervert was like fucking molesting young boys, and it's like, no, he wasn't molesting young boys. They were much younger than him for sure, but they were of legal age, and he was running a what appears to be and or promoting, you know, that's as far as the evidence shows, to sex tourism in Brazil, and you know, was advocating for it as well.
A spotlight on an issue where you are on the winning end of it, popularity-wise. So, for example, one of the things we did with Justice Democrats is as soon as AOC won, we did a sit-in Nancy Pelosi's office. That put Green New Deal on the map, that put Sunrise Movement on the map, and in a lot of ways it reinforced Justice Democrats being on the map. I want you to take those kind of actions, but you have to actually use your mind and independent judgment as to which action to take. So force a vote. Jimmy comes to me. Back then, we're still friends and allies. And I go, oh, look, it sounds like a pretty good idea. Okay, I definitely want to do something where we're forcing action, right? So well, what's your plan, Jimmy? He's like, well, we're going to force a vote, and we're going to, get Medicare for all. I'm like, brother, I want Medicare for all. But you have to take steps. You have to take steps. If you go straight to Medicare for all, you have a 0% chance of it passing, and you're going to waste the power and the leverage. And who are you going to get as Speaker of the House? And he's like, I don't know. That's your strategy? No, I'm not going to agree with a moron who has no strategy, no plan, not at all practical. We could have forced a vote on $15 minimum wage, and we could have won that vote. But instead, the force of vote, we're like, yeah, well, you didn't do what I wanted. Okay, then I'm out. I'm not going to help you guys actually get the bills that we all want. Oh, come on, man, grow up.
No, so Cenk, I would point out that Kevin McCarthy is still Speaker of the House. The issue was not whether or not Nancy Pelosi would necessarily become Speaker. The left, people like yourself. Wait a minute.
Who's going to replace Nancy Pelosi? Did you guys have a candidate? Who?
Cenk, if I could, the right-wing caucus got a number of meaningful concessions, regardless.
But that's not what we were going for, Brianna. That's exactly the problem. If they said, let's go for meaningful concessions, I would have been in. They said...
I was going to say, yeah, so there's two big things going on there. Some of those concessions have already been withdrawn because they were kind of ceremonial concessions, and putting Marjorie Taylor Greene onto like a concession, like, sure, that's what you want. I'll allow the far-right anti-Semitic Marjorie Taylor Greene to be part of this until everyone witnesses it for what it is. I'm not against the idea of leveraging soft power when you can have and use it as utility, right? And getting people appointed to different positions, certainly. But if you were asking for, hey, can we have Medicare for all? And it's like, well, you can't just do that through this action. Like you can't eliminate Nancy Pelosi and get Medicare for all as a trade. I'm sure if you could, yeah, obviously, fuck her. Like, no one's gonna be like, Nancy Pelosi versus Medicare for all. I was like, Medicare for all, no matter what. Yeah. But it's like, hey, so by doing this, you'd basically have the power to get everyone to vote on something, and it would be a ceremonial vote. It actually wouldn't be able to enact what you want, because again, this is something that could die ultimately by the Senate, and will, without question. This is a DOA kind of thing, but you could get that ceremonial vote if you wanted that. Two very different things, right?
We're going to get Medicare for all.
Cenk,
sure
with all
we
due
are.
respect, your
Fantasy
characterization of what happened, I think, is reflective of the lack of grace and communication that was happening among the left at the time. And I think if people had been less motivated by their personal animosities against each other, it seemed that Jimmy Dore,
That's so unfair. Come on. Sam Cedar went on bad faith all the way back when, like, you know, that groomer ass pedophile was one of the co-hosts of it, went on bad faith, had a conversation with Brianna Joy Gray, and she was not happy with him, and he was trying to explain it very, very simply and rationally in a way that I thought most people had an ability to understand, in that he's not against, he hates the Democrats like everyone else, he's not against leveraging soft power and using it when you should, but in this specific case, what you are gambling with versus what you can get is certainly just not worth it. At the end of the day, should you achieve what you want to achieve, you will get a ceremonial vote, which will then, if it does pass, go to die in the Senate. And then that'll be the end of this couple series of moves. And in return, it'll be extremely politically isolationist to you, the rest of the squad, the Justice Democrats, whatever you want to call whatever soft power you already have. And it'll be very difficult to work within the actual apparatus and system as a result of the isolationism that you're about to invoke upon yourselves to again achieve a ceremonial vote. And when you like have it laid out like that versus like the idea, because again, yeah, I love the idea. even as a Canadian listening, like that sounds like a wondrous fantasy where it's like you defeat this absolute monster like Nancy Pelosi, you vote her out of power, and in return you bring the thing that Americans have been fighting in the progressive movement for so fucking long to get. Along the way it's been gutted or destroyed, or Mitch McConnell in one way or another, but fucking Medicare for all achieved, Nancy Pelosi destroyed, fucking game over, baby. That's the amazing fucking story of my dreams. What a great video game. But it's like, that's not what you would have done, you know? That's not what would have happened.
Express some animosity toward him several times during our short conversation here. I do think if those personal animosities weren't at play, maybe we could have been in a world where you were listening to myself, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kalinske, other figures on the Cornel West, Chris Hedges, who were also advocating for this and who were being very clear that there were any number of demands. I wrote an article in Current Affairs that set all of this out contemporaneously, so you can go back and look. But it wasn't this idea that we were going to hold the vote and magically get Medicare for all. And to the extent that that was your presumption and your belief, I do think that is a real problem in communication on the left.
That you guys wanted at the time. Name one other concession. At the time, don't make it up now. At the time, name one other thing you guys wanted. I invite you and the rest of the audience to go look at an article I wrote in Current Affairs magazine in November of 2020, in which I consulted with David Sirota and included a list of subsequent ancillary demands that he had written up in his own publication. And I linked to them and said that these are also important. The important thing is that we need to demand something in exchange for our votes. But we don't need to rehash that. Go ahead. I'll give you the last. No, I need to say one last thing, Brianna. I need to say one last thing. You guys make it.
I would double down. I would be like, no, just one. Come on. This one's not like, I'm not a gotcha. I'm not being an asshole here. I'm not like, do you actually know the true history of the Battle of Conquest? Blah, blah, blah. No. It's not one of those. This is, again, something you're very passionate about because you're still bringing it up years later. I mean, it has not a lot of relevance to the conversation we're having at all, like the modern political era. But either way, we're here. So one.
Sound like we're the ones who have animus. No, be clear about how this thing started. As I told you in the beginning, I said, well, that's interesting. Let's have a conversation about strategy. And the minute I said, let's have a conversation about strategy, Jimmy said that we were taking money from the CIA and Nancy Pelosi. You just mentioned David Sirota. He also attacked David Sirota. He also attacked Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! and insinuated she was working with the CIA. So then I thought, well, no, I'm not going to work with a lunatic who thinks that Amy Goodman might be working with the CIA. And second of all, I didn't start the fight. This lunatic comes in frothing at the mouth. I'm being funded by CIA and Nancy Pelosi. How are you supposed to have a rational conversation with an absolute lunatic like that? And then you got.
I gotta give it to Cenk. I do like his impressions. They're all just so silly.
I think we started it. Are you insane?
I started it. I don't care about the personalities. Cenk, you're talking about personalities. I'm talking about issues. All I know is that David Sirota supported Force the Vote.
Yeah, he is right.
No, he didn't.
Many times.
That's not
true. Yes, he did.
No,
and
he
continues to be an advocate.
Between the two of them, I've actually agreed with, I'd say, Cenk more. Less when Cenk gets into this whole, like, the left is actually trying to advocate strictly for fucking, you know, all these culture war issues. That's all I ever hear is these leftists who focus on culture. All that shit is defense. It's always defense, you know? If, like, the biggest channels on YouTube happen to be Tim Pool, Steven Crowder, fucking Matt Walsh, Daily Wire, those are the biggest political YouTube channels. Every single one of them, every fucking day. Trans issues, Bud Light, trans issues, gay issues, trans issues, trans issues, trans issues, trans issues. And so it's like, well, I guess what's dominating the political discourse today? It would seem they're very upset again about what's this? Pronouns. They're mad at pronouns being in a video game that you don't have to go and select unless you really want to get upset about the world around you. If you want to have some kind of, I don't know, oppression simulator, then go play Starfield, because you can be like, wait a minute, I'm not, give me one sec, what do I press? Y, and then scroll down, they them. Okay, so I am not a they them. Fucking pronouns. Yeah, California, current day shit. That's not what I'm about. Haha, oppression, you see. I feel it, +5 oppressed. So that's the right wing. It's not like, and then like I'll laugh at that so people can realize that's just silly man baby shit, and like this doesn't concern a lot of us. Honestly, unionize, go get some worker power. Ignore it. Kit that I value and respect a great deal. Let's laugh at it. He is able, as a mature person, to tease away his personal feelings about human beings that he might share an idea with or a strategy with, and the underlying strategy. And I really do hope that we see more of that on the left and less of a focus on who it is that's delivering a certain kind of a message, especially if you're right, Cenk. Is there overlap with doughboy and fuckboy? Like, are those two? Is there, like, if you Venn diagrammed and there was doughboy and fuckboy, would there be some? And it's going to require a united and powerful independent media force in order to actually ever get a progressive into office. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking through some of these tough issues. No problem. And you guys are funded by the CIA. But I'm sure you won't take offense at that. So. All right. right, Cenk, I'll give it to you. That was funny. That was funny. Good way to end it.
But just be cool. Be cool. Let's agree on policies. But you're obviously, Brianna bought her house, has a Mercedes and a Rolls Royce, all funded by Hillary Clinton and the CIA. But it's cool. It's cool. Let's stay friends.
About the only thing Brianna has convinced me of on this show is that there is, in fact, more dysfunction on the left than on the right.
Oh no, that's a bad legacy. That's a bad. The only thing my co-host, after working with her for years, every day we broadcast, has taught me about anything, any topic whatsoever, because we're doing that dynamic, you know, a progressive and a right-winger. Where do they find the truth in the middle? And that's it. That the left won't stop the circular firing squad. Wow. Well, I'm glad they know. Glad they know they can stop shutting, or sorry, start shutting the fuck up about how, yeah, the left are all NPCs in lockstep. No, they fucking aren't. Everyone, one person says something, the other person's like, oh! That's, whoa, whoa, no, no, oh, no, no. Opinions? Like, goddamn. Dudes, 3 pause faces at once. Hat trick. Nice. Nice. No. 4. 5. Oh, man. So that was goofy. That was some goofy ass shit. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free. Just like the podcast.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This show is produced by amazing people like you, and if you want to help us out, please consider donating over at patreon.com/theserfs. The show is made possible thanks to Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Lamidia Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Pappy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Sir Nickus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demo, Tech Tink, Trevbot EXE, Words Greenwood, and not to mention all of the amazing and fabulous people you now see before you.